Hello, everybody. Welcome. Are you having a good time so far? Yes? Good. My name is Elin Brusberg, and I am here today to share an epic tale of woe, in the hope that it might help you should you ever find yourself in a similar position. I work as head of development at Vitek Megler, a part of Vitek software group that delivers high-quality vertical software, in our case, software for the real estate business in Norway. But up until this summer, I worked for 1881, and it's while I worked for them that this story unfolded. Who is 1881, you ask? Well, 1881 is the Norwegian white paper yellow pages phone number lookup service, or what I believe you in Spain call páginas blancas e páginas amarillas. I don't know if you have warmed up to me yet, but speaking badly in the language of your host country is meant to be a good icebreaker. I did try to find some good memes in Spanish about Solr, the index database that we will talk about today, and this is the only one I could find. Unfortunately, I suspect it's just a typo, isn't it? It's meant to say solo, as in I am alone in peril, not I am Solr in peril. But anyway, both of those statements could be said to be a good expression of how we felt during this project. So let's roll with it. Estoy solar ante el peligro. But I wasn't completely alone. As luck would have it, I had my brave and faithful crew. Aren't they beautiful? This is me and my back-end developers. As I mentioned earlier, I don't work with them anymore, but seeing this image sure brings back good memories. As you can see, we were a small and pretty tight-knit group charged with the development and maintenance of everything behind the scenes of 1881. Even though we were few, we had the responsibility of 1.5 million unique users every week. For reference, we are 5.3 million in the whole of Norway, and not everyone is in the right age to use a keyboard, let alone a search engine. The database is large, containing pretty much everyone in Norway, as well as all the companies and most of the public services. With queries all through the day and night, 1881 provide a critical service that needs to have as close to zero downtime as humanly possible. They also have paying customers that deserve good service and uptime. The search engine is lightning fast. How, you might wonder? The answer is a document-based index database that always contains a snapshot of the actual database. It is, as the text says, blazing fast and very reliable when set up right. A couple of years ago, when this story starts, it was set up right. I should also tell you that Solr is open source, so if you are interested in playing around with it, it's fairly easy to set up a small test environment at home. Anyone here heard of it before? Yeah? Have you used this as well? No? You should, it's fun. Yes, our Solr was set up right, and it did the job very well, with hardly any downtime or issues worth mentioning. It was the strong workhorse that we could always depend on, and a large part of our livelihood. That sounds good, doesn't it? Well, let's circle back to the small text and see what it says. The latest release, the last time I checked, was, as you can see, 9.3.0. It was something on 8 back then. Unfortunately, we had fallen a little bit behind for many reasons. Anyone wants to venture a guess as to what version we were on? Try again. Yes, close. The answer is 5.3, which is not even on this list, actually. The reason for how we ended up here are diverse, and I will save them for another talk. Let's just say that for very good reasons, our indexing databases and the Linux service that we ran them on were kept in a time capsule, with a policy to only patch weaknesses and otherwise leave it as much as possible alone. This is the backdrop for the email that I received in 2020. It's in Norwegian, but it was one of those emails you know you're going to enjoy reading. How can you tell, you ask? Well, for me, it's the end of support that does it every time. What is omitted in this view is a long list of servers that were running this version of Red Hat. If you have a long list of servers with an end of support, that is bad news any day. But if I tell you that chief among that list, we found around 10 servers that contained our very important Solr databases, then I think you have an idea on just how screwed we were. We didn't know yet. At this point in time, my mood could be described as mildly concerned. Little did I know that this would escalate to a can't sleep at night, and when I do, I have nightmares about our search index situation pretty fast. Initially, we thought we could just upgrade the servers and, get on with our lives. We even planned on having that bit outsourced to somebody else because we didn't have the time. It's easy to laugh now. I see you are doing it already, but we thought it would be that easy. This is the setup we had for our Solr servers. The diagram is in Norwegian, so I included a mini dictionary, which should also provide a disturbing insight into life in Norway. You will all be very excited, I'm sure, to know that I have brought it here today in the medium of a sticker. So come find me later and I will be happy to provide you with one. Our actual database was not affected by this project, but the servers containing our index databases in Solr was, and they were a critical part of our rig, since they are used in every search, or søk, as it says. We had one server doing the feed of database changes and then replicating those changes to the servers. Our Solr version was from a less politically correct time, when it was considered politically okay to call master and slave. That was appropriate names back then. But in the new versions, they are called leaders and followers, and the names mirror the much more democratic approach, where the leaders are chosen from a set of criteria and can change when needed. We also had a Windows service that had the important job of making sure that this operation went smoothly and with as little as possible downtime as possible and strain on the system. It worked when it worked, but this was the part of the Solr system that experienced the most hiccups, and ultimately a part that we were excited to see if we could do without in the new system, using Zookeeper for some of these functions. Make it obsolete, as it were. As I mentioned earlier, this project was meant to be quick and small. We did manage to deliver in the end and had a celebratory cake. Anyone wants to have a guess on how long it took us?
6 months?
That would have been beautiful, but no. From the first mail in 2020 to the celebratory cake in 2022, it took us 2.5 years. So yeah. Anyway, at the beginning of the project, we were optimistic. We were looking forward to getting a better, newer version. Let's do it. Let's make Solr great again. Unfortunately, it was hard to see clearly all the aspects of the project. It was big and complex, and we had good reasons to take as long as we took. We couldn't dedicate all our resources all the time. We couldn't do all the work in parallel, and most of our resources were only found close to the end of the project. In the beginning, we expected it to be much easier. When we realized we had to upgrade our Red Hat version, we didn't know all it would take to set up the servers. We soon found out that the newer Red Hat version was incompatible with our Solr version. Then the whole project snowballed from there, like a digital avalanche of more work and added complexity. Obviously, all the work we did was important and necessary. I just wished we didn't have to do it all in order to complete this project. But that's technical debt for you. If you wait too long to pay it, you have to live with having a man standing over your knees with a baseball bat while you rummage around for money. We were quite sad when we realized that we had to refeed the entire index from a database. When we got started on the refeed, we still don't know how long we would have to spend upgrading our services, as well as making new ones, just to be able to refeed on all our connections. Some of them were only fed once, a lifetime ago. When we were done upgrading and writing our web services, we still don't know how long time it would take to test and deploy. The only time we deliberately took on more work than the bare minimum was when we decided to use Azure instead of our service provider. But even that was not really a choice. We knew that we had to make the move eventually. That decision had already been made. It was only a question of doing the work once with bad timing or twice with better timing. I am still unsure if we made the right decision when we added the complexity, but it worked out fine after all, and it did save us some time. In the end, our biggest concern was moving the index data. At first, we hoped it would be possible to copy the data over as it was, from the old Solr to the new. It was just files, after all. And just in case they couldn't be copied, Solr did have an API that should have been able to do this copying also. Unfortunately, Solr had made too many breaking changes in the data structure between versions. We had made a new installation from scratch with a new version of Solr in a new virtual machine. It would maybe have been possible to upgrade the data if we instead carefully upgraded the data together with the version, going one version at a time. But that was not an easy task, with no guarantees of success. It also meant starting from scratch and scrapping our installation. But if we had any real hope, then that's what we would have done. We did spend a long time looking at options, but in the end, we felt that even if we did manage to upgrade all our structures and proprietary plugins, we still would never be sure about data quality. What if we, years from now, found that we have ruined a large chunk of our database? It was not something we wanted to find out. However, refeeding the data from a regular database to our index would obviously be very costly and slow. We were talking about a very large database. Feeding from the database to the index also required some computing to make sure that the snapshot we were feeding contained the most recent and correct data without duplicates, something that made it even more costly and slow. It was a large operation, and we needed to make sure that it did not affect our performance. We also had services in each tier communicating with the other tiers. This meant that pointing the feeding services against an incomplete data index might result in duplicates and corrupted data in our actual database. Data quality had to have first priority, since we could lose customers and users if they found that they gave them wrong or incomplete search results, even if for a short period of time only. The most obvious would be feeding our new Solr using our existing environments, stage to stage and production to production. However, this would be very difficult to do without disturbing our regular feeds from external sources and services, or corrupting the data neither in the database nor in the index. We knew that it would take weeks or maybe months to feed, even if all went smoothly and as quickly as possible, and the more time it would take, the more out of date the data would be. We will be trying to hit a moving target. We then had the breakthrough idea of using our stage environment to feed our new production environment. This would be less impactful, but would present some new problems, and we still would need to feed both our environments separately, as well as somehow maintaining and feeding the old and new Solr during the entire time of development. Our stage environment database contained a lot of test data, as well as missing data that could only be found in production. We needed to test all the data regularly and make sure that the new index was still working and with good data quality. This would also be costly and would in this case also need to be done thoroughly, both in stage and in production. Luckily, we could soon verify that the index files could easily be copied from one Solr database to the other, as long as they were in the same version, which the new instances was. We could play around with adding and removing nodes on the fly, and the replication would go smoothly. This even worked when we went local and tried combining Solr instances running on Linux servers with instances running on Windows. All this meant that we were able to feed the data from our database in stage to our index in stage, make sure that data was correct and working, and then copy the index files to production and verify the environment and data there. Obviously, the data would not be perfect, but it sure would beat having an incomplete index or having to do a major feeding in production. The first step was to spend some tender, loving care on the stage database, making sure it was as close to production as possible. This way, the index files would be close to identical compared to if they were fed using the production database. This was great news because it meant close to zero strain on production environment while feeding, and no risk of corrupting the production environment. It also meant that we could test and compare stage and production interchangeably over the course of the project, simply by copying the files from stage to production and pointing our search services in stage towards the Solr environment in production, just to verify that it worked as it should. We could do performance tests and compare old Solr with the new and stage with production. It made it possible to keep the old Solr in production untouched by changes, and it also meant we could keep on top of updates on the data from external sources by processing them both in production and in stage, like we usually do. In other words, no data loss or risk on production before D-Day, which obviously felt great. We would also have the option of rolling back with zero effort at any point after the release, as well as having the possibility to point our search service to the new Solr, even if we weren't totally ready in case of a security emergency. This worked fine, and we were able to feed stage relatively painlessly, one collection at a time, as we finished the new services for feeding. We finally had the time to go live, and we did some last-minute feeds in stage from external sources to make sure that the index there was as much up to date as possible, especially on our paying customers. After that, we copied the index from stage to production one last time, verified it one last time, and then did a rolling replace of all our URLs pointing to our index, including our search services. The few seconds that we had some pointing to different Solr instances had no real impact, since the data was, if not identical, then pretty darn close. With no downtime in read and just a few hours voluntary downtime in write, just to make sure everything was doing fine, we had production up and running. Even though we had made the stage as clean, correct, and up-to-date as possible, we knew there might be some data that we wouldn't be able to identify that was wrong or missing. This is why the first thing we did after going live was starting to refeed our biggest collections from production to production, but this time very, very slowly, so it wouldn't affect our performance. Looking back, I guess we were overly positive a couple of times, and we did spend a lot of time and resources on something that really needed to be done yesteryear. But I should mention that before this happened, no one in our team had a lot of knowledge or expertise on Solr, so a lot of the time in the project was spent learning and researching possibilities, especially when it came to the differences between the new Solr and the old, and to the possibilities and pitfalls of the setup that really is the make or break of Solr. We were also a little bit low on the DevOps resources, so deploying and setting up our environment in Azure was a long journey with a steep learning curve. At this point, none of our developers had any real interest in learning DevOps, and still they were forced to take on large tasks in that area, something I still feel bad about, and also meant a risk of losing people. The project also strained our quality team, since they had to test and feed a lot during weekends and evenings. It was grueling and boring work, and honestly felt like it would never end. If you do find yourself in the unlucky position that you must do a large upgrade on your data on the fly, maybe you would like to do it in iterations or on separate servers in order to not put too much strain on your system. Thinking through and planning every step of the operation made it possible for us to do this quite seamlessly and with virtually no downtime. The data loss was also minimal and the perceived quality unaffected. All the decisions and solutions were obvious in hindsight, but needed quite a few brainstorming sessions to be found. It's also impossible to plan too far ahead on complex projects like this, since it can be difficult to anticipate everything that can occur. We had minor problems that we had to solve along the way, and minor decisions, like keep using Linux or switch to Windows where we had more experience. All of these decisions had the same pattern of trying to think ahead, but knowing that there would always be a limit to how much we could foresee. Or, in other words, seek success, but prepare for vegetables. This lovely quote is from InspiroBot. One of the reasons I am here and doing these talks is to inspire and empower you guys, so let's end on something positive. I also know that you can't do a talk in 2023 without mentioning or utilizing artificial intelligence. So I'm giving the stage away to InspiroBot, maybe the most useful AI implementation out there, and also one that, to my knowledge, isn't stealing any jobs from anyone, not even life coaches, I think. It's also good to know that all you need is a ghost and talent. I already have a ghost. Maybe one day I will find the talent. One more just to inspire you, that extra 10%. Yes. That's all I have for now. Do keep in touch. Thank you.